His hands were everywhere, pressing into my skin like he owned it, like he had waited a lifetime to take what I never thought I'd give. I could still hear his voice in my ear, rough and breathless, telling me I was his. Every inch of me, claimed, completely, without mercy. If you're still with me, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. Your support keeps us going, and we can't wait to share what's next with you. I still remember how my fingers trembled that night, trying to thread a needle by the dim light over the old kitchen table. I wasn't sewing anything important. There wasn't any fabric stretched out in front of me, no dress waiting to be finished. I just needed to feel something steady between my hands, something that didn't slip through my fingers the way life had started to. Across the room, my mother slept in her chair, thin and small beneath a heavy gray blanket. The soft hum of her oxygen machine was the only sound filling the house, steady and cruel, like a metronome counting down the seconds I had left to change anything. I held my breath as I watched her chest rise and fall, careful, fragile, like she could disappear if I blinked. On my finger sat the only thing left that felt unshakable, a small, tarnished silver ring. It used to shine once. My grandmother's hands had worn it down through a lifetime of scrubbing floors and boiling sweet tea in this very kitchen. When she passed it to my mother, Mama used to hold it up to the light and tell me, "This ring doesn't hold wealth, Clara. It holds our name, our dignity." But dignity couldn't pay the mortgage. It couldn't buy medicine. It couldn't save this house from slipping out of our family's hands, and it sure as hell couldn't stop my father from doing what he called the only way to save us. The knock on the door came sharp and cold. One single rap, not too hard, not too soft. Like the man behind it already knew how this night would end. I knew too. My father stood in the doorway, his face as stiff as the ironed lines on his old Navy suit. He didn't say much. He rarely did anymore. His eyes flicked toward Mama in the chair before landing back on me. Heavy, apologetic, final. "They're waiting downstairs," he said. Not a request. Not a suggestion. A verdict. I stood slowly, pulling my cardigan tighter around me like armor. My feet felt heavy walking down the stairs, like I was being led to something I didn't have the strength to fight. There were no flowers in the parlor, no music, no champagne or candles. Just a long, empty table and a man in a gray suit laying out papers on the bare wood. "Miss Whitmore." His voice scraped against the quiet like sandpaper. "I'm Samuel Dean, representing Mr. Graham Callahan." I swallowed hard. My pulse quickened in my throat. I glanced toward the door, half expecting, half hoping, to see him walk through it. But there was no groom, no stranger waiting to take my hand, only this lawyer, and a stack of papers that felt heavier than the table itself. Is he not coming?" I whispered. Samuel Dean didn't flinch. He adjusted his glasses and smiled thinly. "Mr. Callahan extends his regards. He is otherwise engaged." He pushed the pen toward me with 2 fingers, as if even that contact was beneath him. "Please sign here." I looked up at my father. He stood frozen behind me, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. He didn't speak, didn't plead, didn't tell me I didn't have to do this. I was alone in this choice, or what they wanted me to believe was a choice. I glanced up the staircase toward Mama. I imagined her fragile hand resting over mine, the way she used to when I was a child, too scared to fall asleep. I could almost hear her voice, soft and warm. "You are stronger than you know, Clara." But I didn't feel strong. I felt like a pawn being moved across a chessboard I never agreed to play. I picked up the pen. My hand shook so hard I had to steady it with the other. My name blurred beneath the tears that slid down my cheek before I could stop them. Clara Whitmore. And just like that, it was done. I was a Callahan by contract. Not by love, not by choice, not even by presence. He hadn't even bothered to show up. Samuel Dean snapped the folder shut, and stood. "The arrangements have been made. You'll be expected at Callahan Estate tomorrow." He didn't offer his hand. Didn't even look at me again. He simply left, the front door clicking shut behind him like a lock sealing my fate. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there, staring at my name on the copy left behind. My fingertips traced the signature like it belonged to someone else. Someone braver. Someone colder. Finally, I stood and climbed back up the stairs, back to the kitchen where Mama still slept. I knelt beside her chair and pressed my forehead to her blanket, breathing in the faint scent of lavender and old books that still lingered there. "I did it, Mama," I whispered into the silence. I signed it for you." She didn't stir. The machine hummed on. Tears welled in my eyes again. But I swallowed them down, biting my lips so hard I tasted blood. "Tell me I didn't just sell our name for nothing," I begged softly, though I knew she couldn't hear me. But I said it anyway. Because some part of me needed to believe that somewhere, deep down, she could. It was strange how a place could look like something out of a magazine and still feel like a tomb. The Callahan Estate stood at the edge of Charleston's historic district. White columns, sweeping porches, windows so tall they caught every ounce of sunlight. People probably drove by this place and imagined what it would be like to live here, to wake up every morning with silk sheets and fresh coffee carried to your bedside by someone paid to care. But no one prepared you for the silence. Not the kind that hummed softly in the background, but the kind that swallowed you whole. The kind that made you feel like you had already disappeared, and no one even noticed. "Mrs. Callahan, this way, please." The housekeeper, I think her name was Margaret, gestured toward the grand staircase without a flicker of warmth. She didn't look me in the eye, didn't smile. Just pointed, as if I were a package to be delivered. I climbed the stairs alone, clutching the small bag I had packed the night before. I could have filled 10 suitcases, but I didn't. Somehow I knew nothing from my old life belonged here. The bedroom they showed me was bigger than my family's entire downstairs. The bed was made so tightly it looked like no one had ever touched it. 2 doors stood on opposite walls. One led to a closet the size of my mother's living room. The other, I didn't bother opening. I didn't need to know what was behind, and because nothing here felt mine. I stood in the middle of that cold, beautiful room and realized something that turned my stomach. I hadn't heard his voice. Not once. Graham Callahan didn't come home that night, or the next, or the one after that. Days stretched into a week, each hour folding into the next like pages in a book I didn't want to read. Meals were left outside my door like I was some ghost haunting his house. No one spoke to me unless it was absolutely necessary. And when they did, they called me Mrs. Callahan. Like it was a title I'd earned. Like it meant something. But I hadn't earned anything. I had signed a paper. That's all. It was on the 8th night that I found myself wandering the halls, looking for anything that felt alive. I passed room after room, each one darker than the last, until I reached the far end of the west wing, a place that smelled faintly of cedar and pipe smoke. The door was slightly ajar. I shouldn't have gone in, but I did. The study was nothing like the rest of the house. It felt used, lived in. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, not arranged by color or height, but by wear, spines cracked, corners bent. A single lamp glowed on the desk, casting light over a stack of papers and a half-empty glass of scotch, and on the far wall hung a painting. I stepped closer, breath catching in my throat. It was her, not me, not some ancestor. My mother, years younger, maybe 21, the same age I was now. She stood in the portrait, head slightly tilted, eyes soft but unreadable, dressed in white, lace, hair pinned back just the way she used to wear it on Sundays, and below the painting, in small gold letters, Elizabeth Whitmore, commissioned by G.C. My knees nearly buckled. G.C. Graham Callahan. I backed away so quickly I nearly knocked over the lamp. "What are you doing in here?" The voice hit me like a stone. I turned, heart pounding. Graham stood in the doorway, tie loosened, jacket slung over one shoulder. His face was unreadable, as cold as the marble floors beneath my feet. I was just... This wing is off limits to guests. His words cut sharper than they needed to. He didn't move closer. Didn't ask why I looked like I'd seen a ghost, because he already knew. Why is her portrait here? My voice cracked, too raw to hide the tremble. Graham's jaw clenched, for the first time since I'd arrived. His eyes didn't look past me. They locked on mine, hard and heavy. "Because not everything in this house belongs to me, Clara," he said softly. "Some things I could never have." And with that, he turned and left me standing there, more alone than I'd ever felt before. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was that painting. The soft curve of her smile, the gentle light in her eyes that somehow looked exactly like my own. When I used to believe in happy endings, because not everything in this house belongs to me. Some things I could never have. His voice kept repeating in my head like a cruel lullaby. Morning came, but I didn't move from my spot on the window seat. I sat there for hours, knees pulled to my chest, staring out over the manicured gardens I'd never walked through. A place that wasn't mine. A life that wasn't mine. I tried to tell myself it didn't mean anything. That maybe the painting was just another piece of forgotten art in a house too big to care about. But I knew better. I had felt it in his voice. I had seen it in his face. The knock at my door startled me. "Mrs. Callahan, breakfast is ready." Margaret's voice came through like a formality, not an invitation. I stayed where I was, arms tightening around myself. "Mrs. Callahan, I'm not hungry," I managed to whisper, though I knew she couldn't hear me through the door. I waited until I heard her footsteps fade down the hall before I stood. My body felt heavy, like every limb had turned to stone. But I had made it. Through worse. I could make it through this too. I slipped on a sweater over my nightgown and crept back toward the west wing. Back to the room I shouldn't have entered the night before. The door was closed this time. I hesitated, heart pounding in my throat. But I needed answers. I couldn't live in this house another second with that portrait hanging over me like a curse. I pushed the door open slowly. The room smelled of cedar again, the air heavy with dust and quiet regret. The painting was still there, untouched, and beneath it, on the desk, lay a worn leather journal. Its cover was cracked, the edges frayed like someone had carried it far too long. I knew I shouldn't. But I opened it anyway. The first page held only one sentence, scrawled in deep blue ink. If things had been different, I would have married you 1,000 times over. I slammed the book shut, hands shaking. Elizabeth. My mother. I felt like the air had been punched from my lungs. I thought I told you not to come in here again. His voice didn't startle me this time, because somehow I knew he'd find me here. I turned slowly, gripping the journal like it was the only thing tethering me to the ground. "Tell me the truth," I whispered, my throat tight. "Tell me what this is." Graham leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. But there was something softer in his eyes this time. Something defeated. He walked toward me slowly, stopping just short of where I stood. "It doesn't matter now." His voice was lower than I'd ever heard it. "It matters to me," I breathed. He looked away, jaw working like he was fighting something inside himself. "She was promised to me once," he finally said. "Your mother. We were young. Foolish. I asked for her hand. She said yes." The words felt like knives in my skin. "But your father," he laughed, a bitter sound that held no humor. He made it very clear I wasn't good enough, that marrying into your family would bring nothing but scandal to their perfect name. So she broke it off. To protect you. To protect your name. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. And now you've married me instead. I whispered. Did you do this to get back at her? To get back at us? His eyes snapped to mine, sharp and pained. No. He took a step closer. I married you because I had no other choice. Or so I thought. I swallowed hard, words trembling on my tongue. What does that mean? He ran a hand through his hair, breathing like every word cost him something. Your family is drowning in debt, Clara. Your father. He begged me to take you as my wife, to save your name one last time. He paused, his voice breaking slightly. And like a fool, I said yes. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. So this is just business then? A charity case? He flinched like I'd slapped him. Is that really what you think? His voice dropped lower, rougher. What else am I supposed to think? We stood there, the space between us thick with everything unspoken. Everything neither of us could bear to say out loud. Finally, he let out a shaky breath, stepping back. Believe. Whatever you want, Clara, but don't come back here again. He turned toward the door, his back rigid. And don't go looking for things you're not ready to hear. He left me standing there, alone again. But this time, it felt worse than before. Because now, I wasn't sure if I wanted the truth anymore. I didn't go back to the West Wing after that day. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was scared of what else I might find if I did. The portrait, the journal, his confession. They had all wrapped themselves around me like invisible chains. I carried them everywhere I went, no matter how hard I tried to pretend I was unaffected. I felt them when I stirred sugar into my tea. I heard them in the footsteps echoing through the empty halls. I saw them in the reflection of my own face, every time I dared to look in a mirror. And through it all, Graham stayed away. We shared the same house. We walked the same halls. But we might as well have been living in different worlds. He never knocked on my door, never called me by my name. But the nights were the worst, because that's when I felt him the most, or maybe when I let myself miss him the most. It was on the 12th night that something shifted. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, brushing my hair out of habit, when I heard the creak of footsteps in the hallway. I didn't turn. I didn't dare hope. But then I heard the knock. One soft tap. My breath caught in my throat as the door creaked open. Graham stood there, his tie gone, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. His eyes were tired, like he hadn't slept in days. Can I come in? His voice wasn't cold this time. It wasn't sharp. It was hesitant. Human. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. He stepped inside, closing the door gently, behind him. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at the floor like he wasn't sure what to say. I shouldn't have let you find that painting, he whispered finally. I shouldn't have let you think you were just filling her place. I swallowed hard, my hands twisting in my lap. But wasn't I? I asked softly. He flinched, taking a step closer. No, Clara. God, no. His voice cracked, raw and honest. I told myself that at first, that this was just duty, just business. But every day you were here. He ran a hand through his hair, breathing hard. You weren't her. You were never her. You're nothing like her. My chest tightened. Then, why did you keep me at arm's length? Why did you make me feel like I didn't belong here? He let out a shaky breath, like the words were burning his throat, because I was afraid. If I let you in, I wouldn't be able to let you go. He took another step, his hands curling into fists at his sides. And I don't think I could survive losing something I never deserved to have in the first place. I stood slowly, my knees trembling. "What do you want from me, Graham?" He met my eyes then, really met them, like all the walls he'd built were starting to crack. "I want..." His voice broke again. "I want you to let me prove that you're not her. That you were never just a replacement." I didn't move. I couldn't. But then he crossed the space between us in 2 long strides, stopping just inches away. "Let me choose you, Clara," he whispered. "Please, let me choose you." And for the first time since I walked into this house, I let him. I reached for his hand, threading my fingers through his. Warm. Steady. Real. His breath hitched as he cupped my face, his thumb brushing the corner of my mouth like I might shatter if he pressed too hard. He leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. But I didn't. When his lips finally met mine, it wasn't like I'd imagined. It wasn't fire. It wasn't hunger. It was gentle. Tentative. Like he was memorizing the shape of something he never thought he'd be allowed to touch. His hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I melted into him, into the quiet ache I'd been carrying for days. "Clara," he murmured against my lips, "tell me to stop." But I didn't. I couldn't. Because for the first time, it wasn't about obligation. It wasn't about contracts or family names. It was just us. We moved together slowly, carefully, like 2 people learning how to breathe again after being underwater for too long. He touched me like I was something precious, something breakable. His mouth traced the line of my jaw, my throat, my shoulder, every kiss anchoring me deeper into the moment. When he finally laid me back on the bed, his eyes never left mine. "I'm not here to take what isn't given," he whispered. "Tell me you want this. Tell me you want me." I swallowed hard, tears pricking the corners of my eyes. "I want you, Graham," I whispered back. "I want you to choose me." And that night, he did. After that night, the walls between us didn't fall all at once. They cracked, they shifted, but they didn't fall. Graham still spent long hours at his office, downtown. He still closed his study door most nights, and I still wandered the halls alone, searching for something that felt like a future instead of a sentence. But when he came home, he came to me. Not like before. Not like a stranger passing. Through. He sat with me by the fire. He asked how my mother was doing. He brought me chamomile tea when I couldn't sleep. Little things. Small cracks in the ice that had once separated us. I wanted to believe it was real. God. I wanted to believe it more than anything. But deep down, something still whispered that it could all slip away. That this house, this marriage, this fragile thread we'd started to build, wasn't strong enough to hold. And that's when I heard them. The whispers. I wasn't supposed to overhear them. I never would have. If I hadn't wandered into the sunroom early that morning looking for my missing shawl. "Callahan's about to fold." A low voice, bitter and sure. "Word is the Whitmore assets are on the line too. If we play this right, we can take them both." I froze. The voices belonged to 2 men standing near the French doors. One of them was Edward Whitmore, my uncle, my father's only brother. "What about Clara?" The second man, taller, sharper, smirked. "What about her? She's just a pawn. She doesn't even know half of what her father signed away." My heart nearly stopped. I backed away, careful not to make a sound, but every step felt like glass under my skin. My uncle, my own family, selling us out. I waited until they left before I dared to breathe again. By the time I made it to Graham's office downtown, I could barely hold myself together. "You have to stop them," I choked out as I pushed through the door. Graham was standing by the window, phone pressed to his ear. He turned sharply at the sound of my voice, frowning. "Clara, what's wrong?" I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, shaking. "Edward. My uncle. He's selling us out. He's working with someone, planning to take the Whitmore estate, and your company." Graham's face darkened, but he didn't look surprised. "I know," he said quietly. I blinked. "You know?" He set the phone down slowly, rubbing his hands over his face like the weight of the world was crushing his bones. "I've known for weeks. Your father made some bad deals before I ever stepped in. Edward's been waiting for this moment for years." I felt my stomach twist. "Why didn't you tell me?" Graham leaned against the desk, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Because I thought I could fix it before you ever had to know. I thought if I kept it quiet long enough I could protect you." Tears blurred my vision, anger burning hot in my chest. "Protect me? By keeping me in the dark? By letting me think we were building something real while you were fighting this war alone?" His shoulders slumped, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't want to lose you before I even had a chance to keep you." I turned away, wrapping my arms around myself, like I could hold all the pieces from falling apart. "You don't have to carry this alone, Graham," I whispered. "Not anymore." When I turned back to him, his eyes were glassy, filled with something I couldn't quite name. "You'd stay," he rasped, "even after knowing the mess I've made of this." I crossed the room slowly, standing in front of him. "I didn't marry you for this house, or your money, or your name. I married you because I believed, somewhere deep down, you could be the man who'd fight for us." His breath hitched. "Clara." I reached for his hand, threading my fingers through his. "Let me fight with you." And for the first time, he didn't pull away. It started with a single phone call. I'd seen Graham take hundreds since I moved into this house. Always sharp, always unreadable, pacing back and forth with that cold executive mask he wore so well. But this one was different. He didn't pace. He didn't speak. He just stood by the window, staring out over the garden like the words on the other end were chipping away at him piece by piece. I waited by the door, heart thudding so hard I could barely hear myself think. When he finally hung up, he stayed facing the window, his hand braced flat against the glass. "What happened?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. "Graham?" He let out a breath so heavy it sounded like it carried the weight of his entire life. "It's over," he whispered. I crossed the room, reaching for his arm, but he pulled away gently, like touching me might break him in half. "They've filed the claim. Edwards pushed it through. He's using your father's debts to leverage control over Callahan Enterprises. By morning, my board will force me to step down." My mouth went dry. "There's got to be something we can do." He shook his head slowly. "There's nothing left to fight for, Clara." His voice cracked, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw him look small, defeated. I reached for him again, this time cupping his face in my hands, forcing him to look at me. "We can fight together. We can—" He caught my wrists, his grip trembling. "Don't you see?" His voice rose, raw and broken. "If I keep fighting, it's you they'll come after next. Your family's name. Your mother's house. They'll take everything. I can't—" He swallowed hard, shaking his head like the words were burning him alive. "I can't let that happen to you." Tears blurred my vision. "Graham, please. I'm leaving." His voice was barely above a whisper. "What?" "I'm stepping down, walking away. I'm signing it all over to them." I felt the ground tilt beneath me. "You can't—" "I can." He stepped back, dropping my hands. And I will. I watched in stunned silence as he crossed to the desk, pulling a small leather folder from the drawer. He turned back to me, holding it out like it weighed 1,000 pounds. This is everything I built. Every share, every contract, every piece of me I poured into that company. I shook my head, tears spilling over. You don't have to do this. We can fight. Clara. He stepped closer, pressing the folder into my hands. I spent my whole life fighting for something I thought would make me worthy. For a name. For power. For control. His voice cracked again. So low I almost didn't hear it. But none of it matters if it costs me you. I clutched the folder to my chest, sobbing. You don't have to choose between us and your life's work. I already have. His lips quirked into a broken, almost smile. And I choose you. He leaned in slowly, pressing a soft kiss to my forehead, gentler than anything he'd ever given me. All I wanted was you, he whispered. And then he turned and walked out the door. Out of the room. Out of the house. I don't know how long. I stood there, clutching that folder like it held my heart in its pages. Hours, maybe. Long enough for the sun to dip low, painting the garden in gold. Long enough for the tea Margaret had left outside my door to go cold. Long enough to realize I couldn't let it end like this. I ran down the front steps, heart pounding, scanning the driveway. Empty. I turned back toward the house, my breath catching as I spotted something propped against the front door. The portrait of my mother. He'd left it there. No guards, no lawyers, no threats. Just the woman he'd once loved, and the family he was walking away from, so I wouldn't have to lose it myself. I reached for the frame, my fingers tracing the edge like it might give me the answer I couldn't, and in that moment, I knew. He didn't walk away because he was giving up. He walked away because he finally understood what mattered most wasn't a name, or a company, or even a legacy. It was us. And I wasn't going to let him carry that alone. It didn't feel brave when I ran after him. It didn't feel like the kind of grand gesture the books and movies promise you'll make when you finally realize what you have to lose. No. It felt messy. Terrifying. My hands trembled so badly I could barely lock the front door behind me. My heart raced as if I'd run a mile, though my feet hadn't even touched the driveway yet. I don't know what I thought I'd find when I reached him. I only knew I couldn't let him walk away believing I didn't want him. Not after everything. Not after I finally saw the man behind the cold walls and sharp words. The night air clung to my skin like damp silk as I crossed the empty lawn. I could still see the lights from the house behind me, soft and golden in the windows. But I didn't dare look back. Not yet. I knew where he'd gone. I don't know how, but I knew. The old magnolia tree behind the north garden had stood longer than this house had been in my family's name. Its branches curved low to the ground, wide and sheltering, like arms, reaching toward the earth. My mother used to sit beneath it when I was small, humming lullabies to herself while she read books in the afternoon sun. I found him there, just like I knew I would. Graham was sitting on the ground, his back pressed to the thick trunk, elbows resting on his knees, face buried in his hands. He didn't hear me at first. Or maybe he did, but couldn't bring himself to look. I stood there for a long moment, watching the man I had once believed incapable of breaking finally fall apart. My throat burned. My chest felt too tight. But I couldn't turn back now. I took a shaky step forward, then another. He heard me that time, his head snapped up, and when his eyes met mine, something inside me shattered. Clara, he started, voice already thick. No, I whispered, holding up a hand to stop him where he sat. My breath hitched as I knelt on the grass a few feet in front of him. clutching the leather folder I'd carried all the way from the house. I pressed it to my chest like a shield, like I needed something solid to hold on to while my heart threatened to break open in my hands. "I know why you did it," I whispered, voice trembling. "I know you walked away because you thought you were protecting me, and my family, and my mother's name." I swallowed hard, willing the tears to stay down. "But you don't get to make that choice for me. Not anymore." Graham flinched like I'd struck him. "Clara, I never wanted to. No, listen to me." I cut him off, crawling closer on my knees, my voice breaking with every word. "You think I care about this?" I held up the folder between us, shaking it in my hands. "You think I care about your company? About all these deals and contracts and signatures that you keep throwing yourself on like they're the only thing that matter?" I let the folder drop to the ground with a soft thud, letting the weight of it fall away. "I don't want your name, Graham. I don't want your fortune or your company or whatever it is you think you're leaving behind." I reached for his face, cupping it in my trembling hands. "I just want you. That's all I've ever wanted." He let out a sharp breath, like my words had knocked the air from his lungs. "Clara," he choked, hands reaching for my wrists, holding me like I was the only thing keeping him afloat. "I'm nothing without you," he whispered, voice breaking. I tried to be. I tried to walk away. But the second I did, I realized I didn't have anything left to give. Tears spilled from my eyes as I leaned in closer. "Then stop trying to protect me by leaving," I begged. "Fight with me. For us. For the family we can build. Not the one we've been trying to fix." He broke then, his whole body folded into mine as he wrapped his arms around me, burying his face in my shoulder, and held me like he was afraid I might disappear. "I'm sorry," he whispered again and again, his voice raw and shaking. "I'm so damn sorry for all of it." I pulled back just enough to see his face, my hand still framing his cheeks. "Promise me," I whispered, barely able to breathe. "Anything," he rasped. "Promise me you'll come home with me. Not to the company, not to the contracts, just to me." He nodded, so broken and open it nearly undid me all over again. "I promise," he whispered. We sat there until the sky turned to ash, and the first stars blinked awake above us. And when we stood, hand in hand, walking back toward the house with nothing but each other, I knew we had already won. We had already chosen each other, and this time, no one could take that from us. The house felt different when we returned. It wasn't the walls or the windows. It wasn't the soft hum of the old grandfather clock in the front hall. It wasn't even the flicker of candlelight that Margaret had left glowing on the side table, like she'd known somehow we would come back. It was us. For the first time, since I'd crossed that threshold as a stranger, I wasn't walking into someone else's life. I wasn't a name on a contract. I wasn't a pawn on a board I never asked to play on. I was his wife. By choice. And he was mine. We didn't speak much that night. There weren't words big enough to fill the spaces we had both spent so long trying to ignore. But somehow, silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like a promise. He led me to the study, the room I had once entered as an intruder. The room that held more ghosts than either of us had been willing to face, but the painting was gone. I froze in the doorway, staring at the empty space on the wall where my mother's portrait had hung. "Where?" I started, but Graham gently pressed, his fingers to my lips, shaking his head softly. "It's not ours to carry anymore," he whispered. I blinked, the weight of that simple truth settling in my chest. He reached for my hand, threading his fingers through mine. "Come with me," he said softly. We left the house hand in hand, stepping out into the cool night air. He didn't stop until we reached the old guest cottage near the garden, the little white building that had stood locked and forgotten for as long as I could remember. He pushed open the door, revealing the dust and stillness inside. The air smelled faintly of lavender and cedar, like time had folded itself into the walls and waited for us to return. "I used to dream of living in a house like this," I whispered, running my fingers over the old wooden table near the window. Small, simple, ours. Graham stepped up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. "Then let's start here," he whispered. We spent the next week bringing life back into that little cottage. We opened the windows and let the breeze carry out the dust and silence. We scrubbed the floors, polished the old brass fixtures, and hung simple white curtains that fluttered like soft breaths in the sunlight. Margaret raised an eyebrow the first time she caught us hauling boxes out of the main house, but she didn't question it. She simply started leaving 2 cups of tea at the cottage door every morning, as if she'd known all along that we belonged there more than anywhere else. Graham didn't return to the company. He didn't take the calls that came, or the visitors who knocked on the door. He stayed with me, and in that little cottage, surrounded by chipped paint and creaky floors, we found something neither of us had ever really known before: peace. One morning I woke before him. I lay there for a long moment, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, his arm heavy and warm across my waist. For the first time in months, there were no papers to sign, no lawyers to face, no shadows lurking in the corners of my heart. I slipped out of bed quietly, pulling on my sweater and slipping outside into the crisp morning air. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the sky was soft and pale, like the world itself was holding its breath. I walked back toward the main house, toward the place I had spent so many nights feeling like I didn't belong. I found Mama sitting by the window in her chair, her hands curled in her lap, her eyes half-lidded with sleep. "Good morning, Mama," I whispered, kneeling beside her. I rested my head on her blanket-covered knees, breathing in the faintest trace of lavender that still clung to her skin. "We're home now," I whispered. "We're really home." She didn't answer. She hadn't spoken much in days. But her fingers, they twitched, just slightly, curling ever so faintly into my hair. And that was enough. Later that evening, Graham and I stood in front of the fireplace in the cottage, the soft glow of the flames casting warm light across the room. He took my hands in his, turning me gently to face him. "There's something I haven't asked you yet," he said softly, his voice steady but rough around the edges. I tilted my head, heart catching in my throat. "What's that?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver ring, the one that had belonged to my grandmother, to my mother, and now, to me. "I never asked you to marry me properly," he whispered. My breath hitched. "And I want to. Not because of your family's debts, not because of some contract, not because I have anything left to offer, but myself." He dropped to one knee, holding the ring between us. "Clara Whitmore, will you let me build this life with you? No papers, no promises we can't keep. Just us, choosing each other, every day." Tears blurred my vision as I sank to my knees with him, pressing my forehead to his. "Yes," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Yes, 1,000 times. Yes." And just like that, we found what we had both been searching for all along. Not in a mansion, not in a contract, but right here, in this quiet little life, with love. And nothing else. Home. Finally. If this story touched you, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more heartfelt journeys just like this one. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring more stories straight to you. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.